Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is Jon Busdeker, your host on Behind the Star. And before I get too far, I want to thank all of our listeners for sticking with us and listening to all these podcasts that we've done in 2019. And we're so excited for 2020. And we have all kinds of different people that are scheduled to be on Behind the Star and talk about their jobs here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office. If you're not a subscriber to Behind the Star, please do that today. You can subscribe on Apple iTunes or Google Play. And also, if you're not following us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, you are missing out. We put out all kinds of great videos and photos of all the great things that we're doing here at the Sheriff's Office. Over the holiday break, we posted a video called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. It's a video where our Sheriff John Mina, talks to the deputies and other law enforcement officers about how it's important to seek mental help if you need it, and there's nothing wrong with seeking help. And that video has actually done very, very well on our Facebook page. We've had it picked up in some national news outlets. Sheriff Mina was actually on HLN this week to talk about it. He's been interviewed by several local media, including Fox 35 and WFTV. So check that one out if you haven't seen it yet. It's also National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. It was Thursday this week, but we posted another video called We Are the Orange County Sheriff's Office. It's a video where more than 20 of our deputies talk about why they became deputies and some of the reasons that they continue to be deputies and what they like about the job, what maybe they don't like about the job. Go check that one out too. That one's doing really, really well on our Facebook page. So go see that one. Moving on, I want to thank our guest before we get too far. He is going to talk about something that I have been interested in since I started this podcast back in 2019. This office, this section, this division does something that maybe doesn't have the best reputation, especially when you watch TV and movies, but it is a vital part of what we do here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office. So without further ado, I want to introduce Captain Carlos Espinoza, who heads our professional standards section.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so like I said, when I started this podcast months ago, I had a list of people that I wanted to talk to, and one of them was somebody here, and a lot of people call it PSD, Professional Standards Division, but you corrected me before we started. It's the Professional Standards Section. Tell me why it's not PSD and it's PSS.
Well, years ago it was PSD, but it's commanded by a captain, not by a major. So divisions are commanded by majors, sections are commanded by captains.
All right, so tell me, what is the Professional Standards Section?
We're basically the part of the sheriff's office that I think helps build a community liaison. Like we're the ones that the community can come to say, hey, we're not okay with what the deputies did. And although the community can give us good things our deputies do and report positive things, more often than not is where they come to field their complaints, and they let us know when they're not happy with the service they've received.
Yeah, I noticed when I came in here into your office, there was a little pamphlet in the lobby that said, give a complaint or a compliment. And I sort of laughed at that because I said, I'll bet you get more complaints than you do compliments. Not that we don't do great things in the community. I'm just sure people are more prone to want to complain about something rather than compliment about it.
Absolutely. And I think it's just like watching the 6 o'clock news or whatever. You see the bad, you don't see too many good stories. You do see good stories, but mostly it's the negative stuff or adverse stuff that's going on. And it's the same way here. People let us know when they're upset. Every once in a while, we do get through social media, our email account, we get, hey, good job on this. I want to commend Deputy so-and-so or Officer so-and-so. But typically it is a complaint.
So, Captain Espinoza, why does this even exist here at the Sheriff's Office? I'm sure we do a lot of great things in the community, but like you said, sometimes maybe some things happen where somebody needs to, I don't want to say tattle on us, but maybe tell about some things that we've done. So why does this even exist here?
Well, I think that, professional standards plays a key role in that is we're the people that give, I think, credibility to what the law enforcement does. The community has a place that they know they can come to, and they can voice their complaint free of any kind of, retaliation or retribution, or they can let us know, hey, we think you're doing this wrong. And then professionally, right, the name, right in the name there, we let them know, hey, either our deputies did stuff the right way, they followed our policy and they're okay, or if the deputies did not, we obviously go the other way. And a lot of times we may have to cite a deputy for something that they may end up getting disciplined for. But I think the key part is that they have that area that they can come to and vent and voice their complaint. And that's a big deal. It's what gives credibility to the law enforcement.
So who works in this section? How many different people work here and do what you do on a daily basis?
Well, our section has 8 investigators. We have 7 sergeants and 1 corporal. They're all supervisors, obviously. And then we have a lieutenant, and then myself. We have 1 administrative assistant, and then we have 1 full-time transcriptionist, which we keep her rather busy.
I'm sure. So tell me how this works. So let's say I'm a citizen. I am a citizen of Orange County. Let's say something happens and I want to make a complaint on a deputy, whatever it is. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's different levels of complaints that you get, but let's say I want to make a complaint. What's sort of the process? Do I come in here? Do I send an email? Do I have to fill out a form? Do I have to get interviewed? How does it all work?
Well, it's all of the above. Actually, that's one of the nice things about the sheriff's office, and with our social media accounts and things, we'll accept a complaint however it is you want to give it to us.
And we get them. I'll say I work in strategic communications. I see the messages that come on Facebook, and every now and then we get a complaint, and then we usually push them off to your office.
Exactly. So some people reach out to us via Facebook. Some people reach out to us on a phone call. Some people reach out sending us a letter. Some people come here, in person, and they want to make a complaint. So there's different avenues. We have email. They obviously email us. So any way that you can think of to communicate something, we accept, we look into, and I think we also look into anonymous complaints. So a lot of times people feel like, especially Orlando's such a melting pot. We have people from a lot of different countries that come here, and maybe there's just a built-in distrust for the police, and we try to let them know it's okay to come and tell us that. They just don't know it. Maybe in their country it's not that way. So they want to be anonymous, and they're afraid that they might have some kind of retaliation against them. So we investigate those complaints, and at the end of the day, I think the goal is to correct wrong behavior and protect the agency and make sure that there's a trust between us and the community.
So how does that work though? Let's say I make a complaint, and we'll say it's a verbal complaint, verbally abusive, we'll say. What happens? I mean, do you take my statement and then do you go talk to the deputy or their commander, or how does that all work?
Well, we screen the complaint. If the complaint, it depends on how it comes, but generally speaking, the complaint will come in, we will screen it. A complaint such as that, maybe a deputy used bad language or was rude, how they drove their car. We get a lot of those types of complaints. And then we'll send those to the section. We actually look at them. We document them. We have a system that we call the Early Identification System. We call it EIS. It's how we track complaints. And it's not just on the deputies. We get complaints on civilian employees too.
I'm hoping I don't have any against me. I haven't got one yet, I don't think.
Not you would know, but we do get all those complaints, and then we evaluate them and we send them to the proper section. A complaint such as that is not one that we would keep in here.
Okay.
The complaints that we would look at in internal affairs are pretty much excessive force complaints, complaints of deputy-involved shootings, in custody deaths, discrimination, bias profiling type things. Any case where someone's untruthful, and anything that can maybe lead to termination. If it's maybe someone's had 15, complaints for verbal abuse or things like that, that might lead to termination. We would probably get that. And then lastly,
go ahead.
Anything that the sheriff or the undersheriff tell us to investigate.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, they're the boss.
That's important. That's important.
So, like you said, with the verbal one, maybe something happens, but if you get excessive ones, 15, 20, there's probably a problem there if all these people are coming to complain about it. But going back to maybe the excessive force one, so let's say there's an excessive force one, or somebody says there is. So you said you have a team of investigators. Do they first talk to the person who makes the complaint, and then they talk to the deputy, or do they look for their body cam footage? Is it just like any other investigation?
It's very similar to any other investigation. and what you said is all true. So we would get the person in, we swear their testimony, we ask them, hopefully they're telling us the truth, obviously, right? All our investigators are notaries and can swear people in. And then once we get that, we start looking into it. One of the very first things, and one of the great tool for law enforcement currently, is the body cam. There's many complaints where people will come in and they're annoyed, they're frustrated, and we're like, okay, we listen to what they say, and we go, no problem. They have a case number, they have the deputy's name, and we now through technology can just go give us 5 minutes. We go to our office, pull it up on a computer, look at their body camera, and we go, wow, everything they did was fine. So we can go back to that person and go, look, we just reviewed everything that you said. Yeah, it happened exactly the way you said it, but the deputy did everything right.
Yeah.
And right then and there, they're like, oh, okay, well, thanks for looking. And it's done. And that complaint never goes any further.
Okay.
Which in the old days, and I was in here in the old days years ago.
Before
body
camera,
cam and all that stuff, you would take a sworn statement from them, and then you'd have to do a follow-up investigation that could be very lengthy. But if there is something that we think, oh, you know what, the body cam shows something, or maybe if there is no body cam available for whatever reason, then we would do an investigation. We start interviewing witnesses and talking to people. And I think the only thing different than what you would suspect in a traditional investigation is that police officers have what's called the Police Officer's Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
And
Explain that a little bit.
Well, it basically just says, in a nutshell, it's Florida State Statute 112, which basically says that police officers have certain rights when they're under investigation. Police officers, correction officers, they have certain rights, and we have to do certain things. And as long as we file those things, we can't be unreasonable about when we're interviewing them. We can't, we have to provide them the evidence against them. In other words, they have certain rules that we have to comply with, and if we violate those rules, then we could potentially violate the officer's rights, and then there are sanctions that could be taken against the agency. So I'm very proud to say here at the Sheriff's Office, we just don't have those issues.
How did you end up here in the professional standards section?
Well, years ago, I was one of the investigators here when I was a sergeant. I think in like 2002 through like 2006. At that time, I was a sergeant in the auto theft unit, and I was asked to come into PSD. I think they keep a short list of people. We try to be diverse. I'm Hispanic, so I think it helps. With the fact that I can speak in Spanish. So I was asked to come in here and came in here for a few years, liked it, and then when I left, got promoted up the ranks. And when Sheriff Mina became sheriff a little over a year ago now. They asked me if I would consider the former captain retired.
Yep.
And they asked me if I would consider coming back in here and taking over, and I was glad to do it. So it's a very good job.
And how long have you been in law enforcement?
I've been in law enforcement a total of 34 years. This is my 29th year at the Sheriff's Office.
And not always in the professional standards. You've done a little bit of everything.
I have. I've pretty much worked in just about every unit you can think of.
And I think that's good to know, because I think, maybe somebody comes in here and they says, well, he's always just been in PSS, I guess, in the professional standards. He doesn't know what it's like to be on the road or having to deal with the public, but it's not true. I mean, you've been out there, you've done this.
Yeah, and we try to, one of the things that we try to, and I guess we work directly for the undersheriff. So in other words, my direct boss is the undersheriff. That's who I speak to. I don't answer to a chief deputy. I don't answer to a major, which is a little bit unusual. I think there's a couple other captains in the agency that do that as well. Your captain, I think, is one of them that does that. But because of that, we want to make sure we have a diverse group of people in here that have different. We have tactical people with a lot of tactical experience. Former longtime SWAT operatives. We have people that have been investigators in homicide. People have done sex crimes, economic crimes. So it's a conglomerate that sort of is mixed up, and it's so that we can better investigate cases without having to seek outside help, even though we will if we need to. So we try to be very diverse in here, and the experience level especially.
So if you were to work in this section, are you usually assigned to it, or do people request to want to work here, or how do you? I don't want to say how do you end up here, but how do you end up here?
Well, it's kind of both. It's not for everybody. First of all, I'll say that a lot of there is a stigma.
And I want to talk about that.
Yeah, so, there's definitely a stigma. The rat squad, right? Everybody calls
I wasn't going to say that, but I do want to talk about that, because a lot of times you watch cop shows on TV, and when
IA is always like the
IA is always the bad guy. I watched a lot of episodes of NYPD Blue, and they're always the bad guys.
Yeah, it's not that way here. We do recruit. We do have people that let us know, hey, I'm interested in the job. And then the lieutenant and I usually make the final decision. The undersheriff obviously is involved in the decision as well. but we take a lot of things into consideration. The diversity part and the different experience levels. We have some guys in here. We have a couple that are rather new. One that's very new with the organization, new to supervision. But he brings thoughts that, some of us are a little bit far removed from. And so he brings a different component that we don't have. So that's what we try to look for. And so to get in here, usually you're asked if you're interested. And some people tell us no. Some people say, no, it's not for me. I really would rather not do that. But I think the people that work here, and particularly I would say the time that I spent in internal affairs has helped me more than any one thing in my management career at the sheriff's office.
How so?
Well, because when you're manager, you're moved away from the operational stuff. You are more administrative duties, and some of the duties, sadly, involve discipline. And I think discipline, while to me it's not a complex issue, it's one of those scary things that people don't like to touch. And when you have the experience from being in here, it takes that fear away. It's kind of like, oh yeah, that's no big deal.
Yeah.
And so I think that one thing has really helped me, and you're not intimidated by maybe if someone's a protected class or just, I don't know, something that you would go, oh, I better not mess with that person, even though their performance is not adequate. That is no big issue because you're dealing with performance issues, not with people issues. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So like if somebody comes in here with a complaint and then you guys investigate it and you determine, okay, something wrong happened here, does this section recommend the discipline or
not at all?
No. Okay.
That's
You just sort of determine that it happened.
Yeah. We're strictly fact finders. And then we also have to house all the investigations. So a lot of times when someone gets, let's say they're sustained for an offense and they want to appeal the charge, they have to reach out to us because by policy we keep my administrative assistant's also the records custodian for the section for all discipline. So she has access to everybody's discipline. So people reach out to her for stuff like that. But yeah, no, if we have to, sustain someone for a violation, all we do is say, hey, look, it looks like they violated policy. And we use what's called preponderance. So 51%. If it's tipping the scale a little bit, it looks like you did it, we're going to say you're sustained. And then it's your chain of command that gives you discipline. And I like that because it keeps us out of it. We are neutral when it comes to that.
Yes.
Either you did something or you didn't, or it looks like you did something more than it looks like you didn't do it.
So who determines that? Is it just the one person doing the investigation, or is it your whole team? Do you all look at the facts and say, all right, well, we think, like, is it like a jury thing? Or
well, no, that's the other part that's a little bit different about cases in here, although, like I say, everybody's got investigative experience. Every case that comes out of our office is signed off on by a sergeant and also by a lieutenant and then by me. So we've had every eye look at that. And then there's cases sometimes where we'll roundtable them, and they're not so black and white.
Yeah.
And so we'll have a roundtable. We bring everybody in, and we're like, okay, let's hash it out and see. And again, we want to do what's right for the deputy, certainly, but we also want to do what's right for the community and what's right for the agency.
Exactly.
So it's
because I mean, and you probably know that. I mean, the agency is bigger than any one person, and so, like you said, you have to protect the integrity of the agency because this is going to go on, hopefully, for a long time.
Exactly.
Beyond the one individual.
And I think that when the cases, especially the more serious cases, we have the luxury also is that not only will we conclude it and we conclude what we think is the best outcome, we also then will send it to our legal section, and we work very closely with legal, and we will have them do a review, and then they come back and they give us their thoughts, and they'll tell us whether they think we're okay or not okay. We don't do it on every case. We do it on termination type cases, certainly prosecutable type cases if we have to arrest someone. So we have a lot of hands that are involved and look at it. And I think for the most part in the year that I've been here, and really even historically, the reputation of this section has always been a rather good one, I think.
So what's the most common complaint you get for both sworn and civilians? What would you say is the most common complaints?
Well, I tell you, and I don't want to throw out a bunch of stats, but I am going to hit you with some
stats.
No,
that's fine. That's fine.
Because I think it helps a little bit in understanding, and I think a lot of people wouldn't know this. So in Orange County, and roughly, don't hold me to the exact number, okay? But roughly speaking, we deal with about 100,000 people per month.
Okay.
Where we have some sort of contact in some way. We average about between 40 and 50 complaints a month. So when you look at the percentages,
yeah,
it's ridiculously small, right? So, I mean, it's less than 1/2 of 1%. I mean, it's way, way, way down there. It's even less than that. So, and of those, cases that are sustained are like, even maybe 1.
Yeah.
So it's really, really small. So I say that to say we're doing a really, really good job overall. But the most common complaint, probably rudeness. We get a lot of rudeness complaints, and we get a lot of driving complaints that our deputies, people will see you in your patrol car and they're like, hey, car number whatever.
Yeah, going too fast.
Is going too fast. Or I saw them texting. And people want to voice that, and we do pay attention to those. We will look at those. Now, we don't investigate those here; they just don't meet our criteria. But we will send those to the chain of command of the person, and if they get multiple, then typically something is done or something's reviewed, and they can look at their dash camera and they can check out other stuff to see.
Yeah,
so,
and I get that. You're a resident here, and you see the deputy next to you texting, but I'm not allowed to text. Well, why should that person be allowed to text? I totally get that.
Right.
Yeah, and we really can't set an example if we don't follow that example ourselves.
Absolutely. And then the rudeness thing, we get a lot of people that will complain about traffic tickets. I was given a traffic ticket and I didn't do anything wrong, and I think the deputy was being, mean or, rude.
Yeah.
And they associate rudeness with they got the ticket. And really the deputy wasn't rude. He just, he wrote them a ticket, and that's their perception.
Yeah, that's a subjective thing, being rude.
And so,
unless you call him a jerk to the face. But
exactly.
Hopefully our deputies aren't doing that.
We typically, we have had some, but we typically don't get that.
Yeah.
And those complaints, we just tell them to go down to the courthouse. And I said, we can't say the deputy shouldn't have written you a ticket or should have. You have to go, there's a process to fight that. So, but that's really the most common complaint. What we work in here the most in professional standards are excessive force. That's probably the most frequent type of complaint that we work in here. And I think last year, we just did our stats, and I want to say we had I think it was like 6 or 7. It may have been less than that. It was right around that.
Okay. So
of excessive force complaints, of which I don't think any were sustained.
So who determines that? What's the difference between force and excessive force?
Well, I think there's a reasonableness factor that we play into it. Obviously, we use our use of force matrix, and so we look at all the circumstances. Would another deputy, a reasonable deputy in the same circumstances and the same conditions, have done the same thing? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is yes, then the force is going to be reasonable. If the answer is no, then we're probably going to say it's excessive.
Okay.
And again, it varies from complaint to complaint. From deputy to deputy. A lot of it has to do, one of the things that I like to do is I always like to look at the deputy's intent. What was their intent when they did whatever it was that they did? And typically, like I say, our officers are on the right side more often than not, which is a good thing, obviously.
Do you think that's something, I'm just asking from maybe a resident perspective, would they say, well, of course you're going to side with the deputies more often than not because you're a deputy, or you worked as a deputy, and you're just trying to protect your people. Is that a common thing that people say, or like you said, you want to make sure you're doing the right thing here?
Yeah, that is. I'm gonna say it's fairly common that people say that, and it's reasonable, right? You think, oh yeah, the cops are watching cops. You guys are all gonna cover for each other.
Yeah.
The funny thing is having worked in many different places, that's always sort of offended me because, I don't want a corrupt person working in this business. And I know that none of the other people that work here do either, nor the people that came before us. And I think that's what I think people don't understand is that when a cop does something bad, it makes all of us look bad. And so we try to get rid of those bad apples. And in my career, I've arrested police officers. I've been involved in their termination, even though I didn't actually terminate them, but my investigations led to their termination. And, I'm proud of the work that I did. And that's what I tell people is people ask me, hey, how do you like being in there, and I jokingly say, it's they did it. I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
They did it. It was brought to our attention, and we worked how we were supposed to.
I think that's an important point because I'm a former news reporter, and I never liked hearing stories about reporters being bad reporters because it made the rest of us look bad. Right. I'm sure teachers could say the exact same thing.
Right.
When you see teachers that they do bad things, all the great teachers, they get drugged down with that. And so I'm sure, like you said, it's the same with law enforcement officers. They don't want people on the force that look bad because it makes everybody else look bad.
Right. And that's one of the things that I shouldn't say a lot, but we get complaints from other law enforcement, each other. I think one of our during last year we investigated an excessive force complaint, and it was a supervisor that saw the guy's body cam and goes, "Hey, he shouldn't have used this force. It's too much." And so he sent it to us to look at. We looked at it, and we did. We cited the officer. In that case, he was a younger officer who was overzealous. His intent wasn't to damage or hurt. He wasn't being malicious. He needed training and needed to be corrected and disciplined. And he was all those things. And so you can save someone's career. And I think that's where people sometimes forget is that, discipline, and the reason we give discipline is to correct the behavior.
Yeah. It's
not to punish it. Yes, it is punishment, but we want to correct that wrongful behavior and keep others from repeating it. And so, like I say, I enjoy the work that we do in here. I'm very proud of the work that gets done in here. We do get a bad rap. It's part of, I've been a cop 29 years. It's part of the thing. You get the rat squad stuff. You get the, oh, you're IA. You guys are dirty. You guys hate all of us. Couldn't be further from the truth. And we actually, most of the times, are protecting the deputies and the agents.
So you bring up a good point there. How often do you get complaints from other law enforcement officers here, other deputies here at the sheriff's office? How often do they come in that way?
It's infrequent. We do get them. We had one fairly recently that was cleared up pretty quickly. But it's infrequent. But it does happen. Usually we do get a lot from chains of command.
Okay.
When a supervisor is reviewing a use of force form or maybe a green sheet, one of the accident report sheets,
a green sheet we should say is when you get in a car accident you got to fill out, I guess, a green sheet. I've never been in a car accident, but I hear you got to fill it out, and then everything that happens to the car, it has to be tracked, and so that's what a green sheet is.
Correct, and we got to make sure that everybody's telling the truth, and that stuff happens the way we have to be honest, right? We're cops. We're supposed to be honest. We can make mistakes. It's okay if you crash your car. You just can't lie about why you crashed your car.
Okay, yeah.
So
you're texting. Well, at least say you're texting.
Absolutely.
It's not right, but it's worse if you get caught in the lie.
Right. It went from being something you might get in a little bit of trouble for some minor misconduct versus now you falsified a official document and now you're going to get terminated.
Yeah.
And so they can't understand, I just told a little lie. It's not okay. You can't lie when you're doing stuff. And so that we get sometimes, where a chain of command will ask us to look at something. That happens fairly frequently. But just the plain Jane complaints that we get are not too much from the deputies.
Yeah.
Chain of command does, and most of them come from the citizens.
What about civilians, though? With the civilian staff, what's usually the typical complaint about the people that aren't deputies? What's the typical complaint there?
Well, sadly, the complaints on civilians, when we do get them, are usually either criminal complaints, maybe sometimes domestic violence. It could be.
So these are things that didn't happen at work per se.
Correct.
They might have happened outside of work.
Right, and sometimes it could be theft. Sometimes it could be theft of service. We actually we terminated a civilian employee this past year that lied about crashing an agency vehicle. They had access to an agency vehicle. They crashed it. They misreported it intentionally to show that it wasn't them, and then they were terminated as a result of the misreporting of it. So it's those kind of things usually with civilians. Sometimes with civilians, they investigate themselves, and what I say is their section will conduct the investigation because it's like unsatisfactory performance. Maybe someone at the communication center was rude to someone on the phone or things of that nature. They let a phone ring too many times, took too long to answer it, things like that. Typically it's minor, right, because the civilians aren't out there with guns and badges and stuff like that. But generally speaking, it's those type of complaints that we get on civilians.
What about over the course of your career? Are there any sort of cases that sort of stick out that you're really proud about that you can talk about?
I wouldn't say there's any that I'm proud of.
And maybe proud's not the right word.
I mean, it's sad when you have to arrest a fellow coworker. That's not easy to do. It's not easy when you have to, fire a police officer. It's not easy. It's someone's career. And in this line of work, when you get terminated, it's hard to get another job in the same line of work. So, I definitely wouldn't say proud, but I would say I'm proud of the work in general that gets done, and I'm definitely proud of the fact that we have a standard, a bar that we set pretty high especially here in PS, I call it PSD, but in professional standards, that we have a pretty high bar. And
are you the one doing the arresting if we did have to arrest another deputy? Oh, you're the one that has to do it.
Yeah, it would be our section that would do it 9 times out of 10. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're involved in that. That's one of the things that we're tasked with doing.
Do you work a lot with HR?
We do. We work pretty closely with human resources. I'd say at least once every couple of weeks, we're talking. The DDRP, that's something that a lot of people don't know.
What is that?
DDRP, it stands for the Discipline Dispute Resolution Process.
Okay.
Right? And so that's where a lot of people use it, for minor misconduct is what usually goes on. So if let's just say that you had a second unintentional car crash.
All right.
Which by our policy would require that you get
a bicycle. No,
in trouble. And what they would do is you would just fall on the sword, and instead of making us do an investigation, you would do a DDRP, and you would say, hey, I did it. It's my fault. I shouldn't have done it. And then you'd get some form of discipline to try to correct that behavior, right? And there's a form that you fill out, and it saves your bosses from doing a really long investigation. And so therefore it mitigates some of the discipline. And so we do that with rudeness, some behavior and language things, maybe some, being late to work, minor misconduct.
Yeah.
Is usually what that's for. Although sometimes they try it for bigger things, but it typically doesn't, get approved.
So with the investigations with a deputy, is it like almost a do they have a lawyer with them or anything like that, or is that not typical? Well, or is there a union rep with them, or is that how it works?
So it's the investigations that we do in here are administrative in nature, although we do criminal investigations. So when we're doing a criminal investigation, which are infrequent, thank goodness, you have the right, or the employee would have a right to a lawyer, just like they would any other time, any other investigation. And we let them know that ahead of time, obviously. And that's where the whole 112 comes into play, the Police Officer Bill of Rights, because we can compel your testimony. As our employee, our administrative investigations, we can compel you to come in here. If you refuse, you could be terminated. So since we can compel your testimony, there are some protections that are given to you.
Okay.
But yes, you can bring in a rep. Your rep gets to sit with you, look at everything that we have, all the testimony, any pictures, whatever evidence we have, they're allowed to look at. And then at the conclusion of that time, we interview them, and they tell us, either what they did, or they explain it, or they don't. And then, we try to conclude it the best we can at the end.
Is your staff treated pretty good around the agency in the building when you go and, get a soda from the soda machine? And
yeah, I think that overall, and, that's one of the things, John, that we try to, when we recruit people to come in here, we try to, it's a serious job, no doubt. And I think the people are very professional that work in here. But at the same time, we do recruit a certain type of person with maybe a certain reputation, so that, they are respected inside the agency and outside. You had asked earlier, one of the things, I will tell you this, probably more deputies get in trouble for off-duty things that they do than for things that they do on duty.
I can see that, yeah.
And even though we get a lot of complaints for their on-duty behavior, rudeness, he shouldn't have arrested me, things like that. We'll get those type of complaints that come in, but they don't usually get in trouble for those. It's usually the stuff that happens away from the sheriff's office.
Okay, all right.
So, we always try to tell people, we go to new hire training, we go to supervisor training, we go to watch commander training, we go to every training we can, and we try to remind people to, act accordingly.
Well, I mean, and this is a lot of jobs, especially if you have a public job, whether it's, like I said, a teacher or a elected official or here a deputy, you're kind of always a deputy. I mean, whether or not you have a badge on at that moment, no matter what you do on your free time, you're still a deputy. Right. Whereas it's not always the case if you work in a private industry, because you can go to work, and then what you do on your off time, as long as it's legal, you can kind of do that. But here, you can't do that as much. You're always representing the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
You are, and you're representing your community, and you're representing law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I think that police officers are, and in my opinion, should be held to a higher standard. So. If you were a dentist and you get a DUI, you probably go being a dentist the next day.
Yep.
If you're a deputy sheriff and you get a DUI, very, very different.
Yeah.
If you're a school teacher and you get arrested for shoplifting, maybe you get to keep your job,
Yeah.
right? Maybe.
But you probably get your picture in the paper.
But you're not going to get to keep your job if you're a deputy sheriff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So an umpire. We had a case in here one time where a deputy sheriff was an umpire, a baseball umpire, and acted very inappropriately over a little league umpire game with like 10-year-old kids or whatever, And people knew that, in this case was he was a deputy sheriff. And they made a complaint. And they're like, hey, because they knew he was a police officer and because of how he acted, his actions were unbecoming, and he got in trouble for it. So it's just something that, like, again, maybe a news reporter doing the same thing wouldn't get in trouble for.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things.
So we spent this whole time talking about complaints, but we didn't talk too much about compliments. I don't have a ton of time, but I want to ask, when you do get a compliment, and what happens then? Do you usually talk to the deputy or get them an award, or how does that work?
Well, we don't send them an award. What we do is when we get a commendation on a deputy is we send it to their chain of command, and we make sure that they know about it. And the nice thing is in our organization, and you may know this, is that most of those things people send directly to the sheriff, which is really nice when you get a letter from the sheriff telling you, hey, thank you for making this person feel good today. That's actually pretty cool. But when they do command on our website, we forward it to their chain of command to make sure that their chain of command gets it. And sometimes either myself or the lieutenant will send the deputy a note and say, thank you for making us look good, or thank you for, helping out with the reputation out there, or whatever it might be. But yeah, absolutely, they need to know that they got that commendation. And I know we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it because we don't get that many. It is nice to hear. People do tell us more nowadays, especially, what a good job we do and how they appreciate us. But we still don't get that many here, not in this office.
Maybe we can change that. Maybe if a deputy or somebody here at the agency did something good, send it over here to the professional standards section. We'd love to hear that stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Captain Espinoza, thank you so much for being here on Behind the Star. And as I said, if you have a complaint or if you have a compliment, please send it to us. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you guys next week on Behind the Star. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Jon Busdeker, and this is Behind the Star.